What's it going to be then, eh? Viddy if you can keep up with me, oh my brothers. Or am I your humble narrator all on my Adinaki this time? I read A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. And oh my gosh, this book is crazy. This book is twisted. This book is extremely short, but I have a lot to say about it. A lot. So let's get into it. First off, this is a modern classic, and this edition has an introduction to it, which I highly recommend you read. Anthony Burgess explains in it that he's not sure why this book has survived. He actually would kind of wish it didn't. He likes a lot of his other writings way more than this one. But he basically, in that introduction, lays out the fact that this story was written as a commentary on good versus evil. And it's very basic. He said there's no real deeper layers to it besides the fact that he's talking about morals in this story. There are a lot of trigger warnings for this book, so I want to say that right off the bat. Trigger warning for this book for rape, murder, what they refer to in this book as ultra-violence, child abuse, and child sexual assault. So there's a lot in this book. There is a lot. And I don't say that lightly. Like, I do not recommend this book to people that are easily triggered. Go into it knowing it's very heavy material you're reading. On that same note, to say that I liked this book sounds terrible because I didn't like it. The content is awful. But I have to say that Anthony Burgess is a genius when it comes to writing. I was intrigued by this story. I was sucked in. I had to keep reading to find out. I couldn't put it down. It's almost written poetically. It is beautifully written. And that's saying something since the content is so dark. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the structure of this book. There are 3 parts. Each part has 7 chapters. It was very important to Anthony Burgess to have 21 chapters for some reason, but this edition is very unique because this contains the last chapter, the 21st chapter. When this book was first published in Britain, it had all 21, but when it was first published in America, the American publishers took out the 21st and last chapter. So in America, it had a different ending than in the rest of the world. The movie, I believe, also ends where it originally cut off. So it didn't include that 21st chapter. But I haven't seen the movie, so I can't comment for sure on that. But Anthony Burgess did not like that. He just accepted it at that time. But this edition includes the 21st chapter. So I will give you later on in my review, I will give you my opinion on whether it should or shouldn't be included. But what's interesting about all these parts and the last chapter, they all start the same with this question. What's it going to be then, eh? It's repeated a lot throughout the book. It begins those first 3 parts and it begins the last chapter of the book, that 21st one. The title is somewhat of an oxymoron. A Clockwork Orange, basically you have to think about an orange being organic and a clockwork is mechanical. It's not natural to nature. So a clockwork orange is where you're taking something organic and natural and trying to make it mechanical. You're imposing things that are unnatural to it. So what is this book about? I kind of given you a lot already, but I didn't really tell you what it's about. So, you're following the main character, Alex, who is 15 years old, and he is a horrible person. He lives in a world where it's like an alternate reality. There's a different government, and pretty much law and order's kind of gone out the window. There are police, but they're kind of corrupt as well. The government's kind of corrupt, and when nighttime hits, like, the teenage boys rule the world. Like, they just come out and do whatever they want at nighttime. It's very dangerous. So when this book starts, you are with Alex and his droogs, his friends, and they're wondering what they're going to go do tonight, what kind of violence they're going to inflict on the world tonight. And this is very common for them. They do it every night. And there are other groups of boys out at the same time that do the same kinds of things. So it is very dangerous to be out at night. You've noticed me saying some strange words you've probably never heard before, like vidi and droogs and adinaki. Those are slang words that are used in this book. The entire book is filled with made-up slang referred to as Nadsat language. And the slang is actually very artfully crafted by Burgess. It is a combination of Anglo and Russian root words to get most of these words. So if you know Russian, I'm going to guess that figuring out this slang might be a little easier for you. I do not know Russian, so I ended up looking up a dictionary online to help me figure out the words and their meaning. I will link that below in case you want to read this and want to use that. But right off the bat, when I first opened this book, you're hit with that slang right away. It is in every sentence almost. It is multiple words. It is a long dictionary of slang words. Like, it is a lot. And so right off the bat, I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be intense. It's going to be intense, and I am going to have a tough time reading this. I'm just going to read you the first paragraph, just so you get an idea. What's it going to be then, eh? There was me, that is Alex, and my 3 droogs, that is Pete, Georgie, and Dim, Dim being really dim. And we sat at the Krova milk bar, making up our rasodocs what to do with the evening. A flip dark chill winter bastard, though dry. The Krova milk bar was a milk plus mesto, and you may, oh my brothers, have forgotten what these mestos were like. Things being so squirry these days, and everybody very quick to forget, newspapers not being read much neither. Well, what they sold there was milk plus something else. They had no license for selling liquor, but there was no law yet against prodding some of the new vetches which they used to put into the old Moloko. So you could peat it with Velicet, or Synthemesk, or Drencrom, or 1 or 2 other vetches which would give you a nice quiet horror show, 15 minutes admiring Bog and all his holy angels and saints in your left shoe with lights bursting all over your mosque. Or you could peat milk with knives in it, as we used to say, and this would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of dirty 20 to 1. And that was what we were peating this evening. I'm starting off the story with. So you can see that is a lot. That is confusing. I read that and I was like, what am I getting into? What is going on? And so at first you're like, this language is going to be really hard. But honestly, it gets easier. Burgess repeats a lot of the same words, so you get used to them. Once you figure them out, you know what they mean, and you catch on fast. But this language, honestly, kind of reminds me of reading Shakespeare. Like, once you start, it's like, oh my gosh, this is very old-fashioned, and I don't know what's going on. But you kind of get used to it as you read more, and so you can figure it out. And honestly, Burgess is very poetic with his language. Like, it is weird, but it is poetic at the same time, or at least I thought so. And so it's not as hard as it first seems. Once you get used to it, it's easier. But like I said, Alex is with his friends and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. And basically, this language acts almost like a barrier. Alex doesn't want you to think badly of him. He doesn't want to get caught doing bad things. And some people pick this up and they read that first paragraph and they go, this isn't for me, and they toss it aside. They don't even try. And it's like Alex wins. It's like his language has distracted you enough that he can continue doing bad things. But if you work through it, you're in on it. You know what's going on. He's not pulling a fast one over you anymore. He's not going to get away with it, or he might. That's the other thing about this book. So once you get past the language, you're either in it and you know what's going on, or Alex wins and you give up and you let him continue doing horrible things. But basically, this book is asking, can bad people change? And so we have Alex, who's our main character, and He is doing terrible things, and eventually he gets caught, and the government tries to reform him. And so that's what's going on. And so the big questions are, can people change, and at what cost? Alex is our standard for evil. He's the worst of the worst. So if Alex can be changed, then anyone can change. If Alex can't be changed, then some people cannot be changed. Now, I want to talk more about the book, but it's so short, like I said, and I can't do that without spoilers. I just can't. So here is your spoiler alert. I am going to spoil things. I am going to talk about this book in depth here. There is one scene from the movie that I know. I don't remember why I had seen part of it, but I think I watched it in a class in undergrad, if I remember right. I don't know why. I can't remember why, because I don't believe I looked this up on my own. But there's an infamous scene that I knew about going into this book from the movie. It's the infamous gang rape scene. I had no idea when that scene took place. I had just seen the singing in the rain scene. Like, I'd watched that scene in the movie. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. That gang rape scene takes place in chapter 2. I did not expect it to be so awful, so fast. I was like, what am I reading? Oh my gosh. It was intense. It was graphic. It was twisted. It was very twisted. But I think Burgess does that to show you just how awful Alex is. Alex talks to you like you're part of his gang. He says you a lot in this narrative. He's the narrator, and he says you, and he refers to you as his brother, his pal, like he buddies you up. You're inside his mind, and he is very nonchalant about all the horrible things he does. He has no remorse. He doesn't care. He doesn't see it as bad. It's just what we do when we're hanging out with our friends at night. We gang rape people, and we beat up people. Just how casual Alex is about it is awful. I mean, he refers to rape and sexual assault as the old in and out. It's graphic and disturbing. He refers to himself as your humble narrator. So just the entire way he talks about everything just tries to pull you in close. It makes you feel like you're part of his gang and you're inside his mind. And it is a very uncomfortable place to be. It is very uncomfortable. I have so many quotes like that I wrote down, but it's so hard to even read them to you because of the language that's used, because of this slang. So I'm kind of just going to give you like an overview of the quotes and stuff instead of actually reading them, because it would be more confusing for me to read them to you. But there's a quote where Alex is talking about the police and how they beat people up when they arrest them. And when Alex is arrested, he is beat up really bad by the police. He talks about how the police are quote unquote good. So if that's the standard for good, then he's glad that he's bad. He doesn't want to be good like the police because they beat everyone up and they beat him up, and he doesn't want to be like them. But he's a horrible person. It's just like, it's crazy being in his mind. There's another quote too where he's talking about how everyone talks about the cause of badness. Like they want to know why he's so bad, but they never ask why people are good. And so he goes on to say that he's bad because he likes it. Bottom line, people are good because they like being good. He's bad because he likes being bad. Like there is no other reason. He likes it. He also likes classical music, which I just have to throw in there because it's like, it seems so random, but he talks about like Beethoven and Mozart and Bach all the time in this story. Like he likes violence and classical music. But anyway, back to the story. When Alex does get arrested for his horrible crimes, he had beat up an old woman. And he later finds out that she dies. So he murdered a woman. When he finds out that the woman died and that he's committed murder, he thinks, that was everything. I'd done the lot now. And me still only 15. Like, he doesn't even have remorse. He doesn't care. He's just like, well, I guess I've committed murder and I'm only 15. Like, it's just like outrageous. It's outrageous. To give you more of an idea of Alex, when he's in prison, he's reading the Bible and he likes it because of the violence in it. He imagines himself like whipping Jesus and nailing Jesus to the cross. Like, he likes the violence in it. It's just, oh my gosh, that's his mind. But like I said, they try to reform him. The government has developed this method to cure him. And basically they're conditioning him to react in a sick way when he sees or thinks about violence. So they strap him to a chair and inject him with something that makes him feel ill. And then they have him watch graphic, horrible scenes of violence of all different kinds to get him to feel sick. And it works, essentially. And those scenes where he's strapped down and his eyes are strapped open, like clamped open, oh my gosh, I get claustrophobic, and reading that made me so uncomfortable. Oh, I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. But this book asks a lot of interesting questions about our prison system and about goodness. So first of all, it talks about violence in prisons and how we're punishing crime with more crime. And is our prison system really working? What's the point of it? Is the point to punish or is the point to reform? And those are very interesting questions, honestly, because our current prison system does have a lot of flaws, in my opinion. So it's very interesting to think about those things. What is the point of being in prison? Is it to punish Alex for what he did? Or is it to reform him and make him better and send him back out into society? Like, what is the point? And then it asks a lot of moral questions, like I said. So they make Alex good, and he doesn't want to be good. He still has thoughts about doing violence, but when those thoughts come up, then he gets violently sick, so he stops thinking them. It's not that he wants to do good, it's that he can't do bad. And so he's kind of lost his free will. He is a clockwork orange, essentially. That's where that comes into play. They're taking his natural urges and making them unnatural to him. And so the book asks, like, what is goodness? Does God want you to be good, period? Or does God want you to want to be good? Does God want you to choose good over evil? Like, those are interesting things to think about. Are you really good if you're forced to be good? If you have no choice in the matter, are you really good? Alex, through the whole book, doesn't see himself as bad. He sees the other people in prison as bad. He sees them as awful perverts and horrible people, but he doesn't refer to himself in that way. It's also very interesting. Alex, after he's cured, he reads the Bible again, and he doesn't get any enjoyment out of it because the scenes that he liked, the whipping scenes, the nailing Jesus to the cross scenes, the violence, make him sick. So even reading a Bible is like, doesn't help Alex. Like, it's like the opposite of what a Bible is supposed to do. A Bible is supposed to bring you comfort and peace. And once he's cured, he can't even pick up a Bible anymore. So I want to talk about the ending. So basically you have this ending on chapter 6 of part 3 or chapter 7 of part 3. And if you end on chapter 6, where the American version originally ended, a chapter short from the rest of the world, you get it where Alex is now able to do violence again. I'm not going to explain what happens, but he basically is uncured and violence no longer makes him sick. So he's definitely going back out into the world to wreak havoc and be his old normal self. And I can see the draw to end the story there because it's more visceral. It's like eerie. It makes it definitely a more horror book because you have this violent ending. But at the same time, I see why Burgess didn't want to end it there, and I see why he didn't like that the American version ended there, because you're right back where you started. Nothing was gained. Nothing happened. What was the point then? Alex is exactly where he was at the beginning of the book. No growth took place at all. Nothing changed. You did all this work reading this book for nothing. Nothing happened, essentially, if you end the story there. We're back where we began. Alex is a terror to society, just as he was in the opening scene. And so I agree with Anthony Burgess that we need the last chapter, because the last chapter shows a change in Alex. And it doesn't show him completely changing and being a good person, but it shows that Alex isn't getting the same satisfaction out of the violence as he was before. He's getting tired of it. He wants something more out of life. He sees a friend of his get a wife, and he sees pictures of a baby in the newspaper, and he's yearning for something more. He's raped a lot of people, so he's had sex, but he's never had sex with someone he loves, and he's never had a baby. He's never loved anyone, but he's yearning for something more. And I think that that's important, because this shows a lot of things. This gets a lot of points across in this book. First, the theme that people can change, yes, but they have to want to change it. You cannot force anyone to change if they don't want to. Alex has this attitude of boys will be boys. I'm growing up. That's why I'm changing. I don't agree with the boys will be boys mentality, obviously, but that's the way Alex thinks about it. He thinks he's growing up, and that's why he wants more than just doing violence. So I don't agree with that mentality, obviously, but I do agree with the fact that people can change, but they have to want to do it. You can't force anyone to change. Do people always change? No. People do not always change. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying people can change if they want it. But basically, Alex is wanting something that he can't take. He's been taking whatever he wants, money, sex, taking everything that he wants from other people his whole life. But now he wants something he can't take. You can't take someone else's love. You have to be freely given that by someone else. And so he wants that. If he wants to get that, he has to change the way he acts. He has to change his behavior. And the story ends with Alex wanting these things and telling us, the narrator, that he's going to work on it, essentially. And so that's where it ends. We don't know if he ever gets it. We don't know if he does change, but that little seed is planted in his mind, and that's where the story ends. And I think that is where it should end. I agree with Anthony Burgess. I think Alex should be in prison, and he should be punished a lot more than he was for what he's done to the world. But that's a whole nother issue. But I think that the story ending where Anthony Burgess wanted to at the end of chapter 7 of part 3, that's where it should end. It needs that 21st chapter for the book. It needs it, in my opinion. You miss out on a lot without it there. You gain nothing from the story if you don't have that last chapter, in my opinion. This was a lot for a really, really short book. It's like 200 pages, guys. Like, it is short. And so those are all my thoughts. I just had to kind of get it all out. And this book was a twisted, dark, wild ride. But I think it's worth it. I think you should read it if you can handle the trigger warnings. Don't go into it if you can't handle the trigger warnings. I really want you to think about that before you read this book, honestly, because it is very, very uncomfortable to read about this stuff from the point of view of the person doing the horrible things. Seriously, I think people should read this book, but only if you can handle it. If you've read this story, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and let's chat about it. I definitely see why this book has been banned in many places. I think that there was a lot of copycat crime after this book came out, and Anthony Burgess does not really like this book. He kind of regrets writing it. That's what I took from the introduction that he wrote for this edition. So I think that's interesting, but I am glad I read it. Enjoyed it is the wrong word to use, but you know what I mean. It was intriguing, thought-provoking, and I couldn't put it down. So let me know your thoughts and we can chat. I hope you have a lovely week, and I will talk to you again soon. Hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for talking books with me.